Joining me now, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council, one of the biggest opponents of same-sex marriage. Mr. Perkins, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Luke. How are you?
Good, thank you. Question for you. Obviously, we're getting some reports that it seems that the court is in position to possibly strike down DOMA, or some based on the states' rights argument. I have a question for you. Do you agree? What is your problem with them knocking it down on a states' rights argument?
Well, there's really two components of DOMA. The Federal Defense of Marriage Act does two things. One, it does for federal purposes define marriage as a union of a man and a woman, but it also preserves the right of the states to define marriage, as 30 states have now done into their state constitutions and 8 through their statutes. So it also protects the states to be self-determining as it pertains to marriage. So it's not all about the federal government.
So do you have a problem then with the state of Massachusetts being allowed to have its views on same-sex marriage, as well as the state of Mississippi being allowed to have their views on same-sex marriage, but in the states where it's allowed, the federal benefits kick in, the over 1,100 federal benefits are available to opposite-sex couples occur as well?
I mean, the question is, what we have in place, what would be the preference? I mean, I think when you look at marriage as a whole, natural marriage, the union of a man and a woman, is the preference. I mean, when you look at the amount of social science research that we have amassed over the last several decades, it's clear that kids do best with a mom and a dad. Now, even in yesterday's argument where they were talking about Prop 8, you know, this is such a new idea. Even Justice Alito made the point that, look, this is newer than the internet and cell phones. We need to move slowly on this. And the evidence does not suggest that children do best just with 2 parents or 3 parents, or the evidence says a mom and a dad. So from a public policy standpoint, our preference is that children have a mom and a dad. Now, to where we are today in this debate, that states have the right to do what they have done. 30 states have placed marriage, the natural definition of marriage, into their state constitutions. The federal government should respect that.
Yes, but there are studies also, especially from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which suggest that having a 2-person home, even if it is a same-sex couple, is actually beneficial for children. So there are questions about your facts on that question. I'd like to ask you, though, Mr. Perkins.
It's interesting that they failed to acknowledge one of the most widespread, deep surveys on that Mark Regnerus did out of Texas. They completely ignored that, and of course.
On that survey, there was real questions about, A, its funding, which was done by some conservative backers, as well as the questioning methods, and we could have a research methods debate at another time. I would like to ask you, though, specifically, Mr. Perkins, what do you fear the most about a couple being together, a same-sex couple being together for over 60 years, like we saw in the Windsor case? What do you fear so much about them getting the same federal benefits for their marriage as a opposite-sex couple would?
I don't fear anything. And the question is, as you heard, as you set this interview up, this discussion up with that package interview, is it talked about people ought to be able to marry whoever they love. I mean, if love becomes a definition of what the boundaries of marriage are, how do we define that going forward? What if someone wants to immigrate to this country that lives in a country that allows multiple spouses? They come here. Right now, they can't immigrate with those spouses. But if the criteria or the parameters are simply love, how do we prohibit them from coming into this country? So if it's all about just love as it's being used, where do we set the lines? What are
so
the
you
boundaries?
Equate homosexuality with polygamy?
No, that's not the argument.
Well, you just
the
said
argument
that
is being made by those wanting to redefine marriage is saying that it's all based on love. It's whoever you ought to be able to marry who you love. Isn't that the argument that they're using? If that's the case, where do you draw the boundaries? That's all I'm asking.
Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, I appreciate you sharing your views. Thank you.
All right, I guess I get it.
Up next, David Petraeus makes his return.